is Encore.
Cool.
The stories behind the songs.
Thank you.
Here's iHeartRadio's Miles Galloway.
And what better way to kick off another year on Encore than with the message, everything will be all right. I'm Miles Galloway, and this is the story of Jimmy Eat World's The Middle. Formed over 30 years ago, back in 1993, Jimmy Eat World was founded by frontman Jim Adkins and his good friend since toddler-dom drummer Zach Lind in Mesa, Arizona, soon to be joined by guitarist Tom Linton and short-lived bassist Mitchell Porter. Despite popular belief, the Jim in Jimmy Eat World's name is actually not referring to the eponymous Adkins. Its origin story comes from a reference to guitarist Tom Linton's brother, also named Jim, who was picking on his younger brother Ed. As Linton told songwriter Chris Blackburn, "My brother Jim beat up my younger brother Ed, and Jim ran into his room and locked his door. And Ed drew this picture and said, 'Jimmy Eat World.' And it was a picture of him eating the world. My brother Jim is kind of a big guy. It's a stupid name." The band toiled on the local indie scene as a sort of scrappy skate punk band for the better part of 2 years, self-releasing and split-releasing their own music with other bands before being discovered by a talent scout from the world-famous Capitol Records. By mid-1995, Jimmy Eat World had secured a development deal with Capitol, with the label agreeing to release one album off the bat, with the option to release up to 6 more future projects. It was around this time that Mitchell Porter left the band, opting to become a Mormon missionary instead of a rock star. Luckily, Linton pulled through again, recruiting his middle school best friend and bassist to this very day, Rick Burge, to solidify the band's lineup. Jimmy Eat World's major label debut, Static Prevails, was released in July of '96, to mixed results. Somewhere along the way, the guys had decided that they wanted to ditch the skate park vibes to explore the sound of post-hardcore emo and less poppy punk rock. All in all, a less polished sound choice that surprised the Capitol bigwigs, who were likely expecting an Arizona Blink-182. Another big surprise came in the form of the vocal tracks. Linton had been the main vocalist of the band throughout the group's independent days, with Jim Adkins singing lead on only one recorded track to date. Static Prevails flipped the script, with Adkins and Linton sharing singing duties, which obviously changed the band's sound pretty fundamentally. According to the band, the label was bummed with the results, with Linton telling Vice in 2016, "Just guys being like, this is a lot different than what we expected." Despite Static Prevails' limited success, Capitol decided to give Jimmy Eat World another go, and the band would produce their second effort on the label, the album Clarity, in February of 1999. If you're a Jimmy Eat World mega fan, you're likely aware of Clarity's retrospective cult status as one of the most important emo records of all time. If you've never listened to Clarity and are curious, I simply can't recommend it enough. The first thing you'll notice about Clarity is, of course, that Jim has essentially taken over lead vocals as his own, with Linton slipping into the background as backup vocalist and lead axeman. Linton does sing on the late album track Blister, though. The next thing you'll notice is that although there are moments of distorted guitars, angsty lyrics and machine gun percussion found on the record, for the most part, the record is a much calmer affair. Organs, orchestral instruments, soothing drum loops, tingling piano riffs, and bells create a sort of dream state across the entire album that the band luxuriates in. The album is in absolutely no rush sonically, with somber Christmas song 12/23/95 and heartstring pullers A Sunday and For Me This Is Heaven, setting the standard for modern emo records of all sorts. Final track Goodbye Sky Harbor clocks in at an extremely unradio-friendly 16 plus minutes, but finishes on such a hypnotic electronica vibe you'd barely notice the duration in the grand scheme of things. From the Postal Service to Death Cab to Paramore, The Shins and beyond, the work on Clarity would continue to influence the sound of alternative and emo and rock for the next decade plus. So of course, within 6 months of the release of the masterpiece that is Clarity, Jimmy Eat World was dropped by Capitol Records altogether in August of 1999. To be completely fair, hindsight is 2020, and while fans and critics have raved about Clarity over the last 20-ish years, Capitol were looking for hitmakers at the time of Clarity's release, and there wasn't really a song that fit that mold. If anything, you'd be forgiven if you thought at the time that Jimmy Eat World were kind of taking the piss by releasing such eclectic, ambitious music. At the time, the band wrote on their official website, "We experienced the good and bad of the music industry and learned a whole lot about what to do and not do." Capitol was busy remastering and re-releasing the Beatles' White Album and Frank Sinatra duets. We sort of fell through the cracks at the label and were dropped. The greatest thing about being on Capitol was to record 2 records that we were really proud of, and it allowed us to tour and build up our pool of fans around the world. More than a decade and a half later, the band remained consistent about their lack of hard feelings around their failed marriage with Capitol. Adkins would tell Vice, "A lot of people think, so the story is you put out a couple records for Capitol, you didn't go anywhere, and you got dropped. Were you so bummed?" That's not what was happening. We would get offers to open up for bigger and bigger bands. We'd headline and come back to cities and there would be more people. From our perspective, the whole thing has been an upward trajectory. Despite their relatively sunny disposition, the cold hard truth of the matter was that by late 99, Jimmy Eat World were labelless at a time where you really needed a label to succeed. Quite literally back at the drawing board, the band members had to temporarily take part-time jobs to keep the dream of Jimmy Eat World alive. On the bright side, as the band mentioned earlier, while Capitol Records didn't want to sink any more money into the group, the live touring business was still an avenue worth exploring. After all, they had 2 albums worth of material, plenty of touring chops, and a growing connection with audiences. Pinching every penny they had, Jimmy Eat World embarked on a short European tour, even going as far as buying unsold copies of Clarity and Static Prevails at cost from their former label and manufacturer in order to sell them at their DIY merch tables. They would tell Much.
Well, what happened was we would buy the records from the manufacturer and then sell them to distribution companies over in Europe.
You bought the albums yourself?
We were essentially our own international distribution.
Have you heard of it happening before?
Well, you know, I haven't. I mean, it's kind of it was just kind of forced upon us by circumstance, really. But I mean, it didn't. I don't know. I guess looking back, it was kind of cool we did that.
It's like you're the ultimate do-it-yourself band out there doing up until this point.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I'd make that claim.
You wouldn't? No.
No.
One of the do-it-yourself bands out there that.
The tour was a success, or at least a moral victory, with the European crowds showing up in their droves, selling out modest clubs, and a bunch of CDs in the process, sometimes in excess of 500 copies a week. But now the band was in a bit of a bind. Their road success pointed towards the need for a new album's worth of material to reward their galvanized fans and hopefully revitalize their career. Their empty wallets and previous failures on Capitol Records made that next step somewhat of a pipe dream, especially since most of their money was being pumped back into the touring itself. Mark Trombino, the band's go-to producer at the time, who had worked on Jimmy Eat World's previous 2 albums, had even agreed to produce this wayward album and defer his producer's fee until if or when the record was picked up and released. Trombino had built a real relationship with the band, almost as if he were the group's 5th member at the time, and felt strongly about betting on their eventual success. Piece by piece, Jimmy Eat World slowly began working on their follow-up to Clarity, recording just the minimum viable product for each song idea, not letting a dollar go to waste. A friend rented music equipment for them, and the band had to write checks to cover mixing costs, often fearing bankruptcy if a check was cashed too early. Here's Jimmy Eat World explaining the process to Much's Rick Campanelli.
This is your 4th, and it's kind of odd because I read that you guys you recorded this whole thing on your own dime, and it being your 4th album.
Mm-hmm.
Is that strange, Jim?
Well, funny you should ask about that. It was strange because, you think by that
time you had a big major record label.
Yeah.
Putting up the bucks.
Yeah, what happened was after our 3rd record, we got out of our deal with our last record label.
Right.
And we just kind of saved up money and decided we would make the record before looking for a new record label. And this is the product of it.
This is the end result right here. Bleed American.
This process, in turn, had a major impact on the eventual sound of the record. As the band explained to Tuscan Weekly back in 2004, if we were having trouble with a transition between a verse and a chorus, we'd be like, We don't got much more time. All right, straight from the verse into the chorus. So it was really bare bones that way. And taking time to build layers and stuff, we didn't have that luxury. It was this lack of luxury that transformed the band's songwriting style. Gone were the experimental 16-minute songs of records past. Gone were the unnecessary instrumentations and the borderline pretentious lyrical and emotional themes. This time around, Jimmy Eat World were hell-bent on creating straight-up pop-tinged rock and roll. In the most year 2000 move ever, Trombino suggested that Jimmy Eat World upload their demos of the unnamed project to Napster. It made sense. This bold new world of file sharing allowed tech-savvy kids to get music in their ears without the consent of a label, and, lucky for JEW, they didn't have one. The power of the World Wide Web didn't hurt the touring either, with the band seeing nearly real-time results at their European shows.
Yeah, a lot of kids, like we'd show up in Germany and play in a town we've never been to before, and kids would be, asking for a particular song that, we know for a fact the only way they could get it would be through, like, Napster or something. Yeah. So that helped us out a lot.
It was around this time that label A&R people, perhaps tipped off by the exciting new piratable tracks, started showing up at the recording studio unannounced. I'm sure it was just because they were totally chill guys, saying things like, "Hey, if you need a label, we're here for you." The band initially responded by locking the studio doors to keep them at bay, as they knew they had something special on their hands and keeping the finished product a secret would only work in their favour. Of course, Jimmy Eat World could only keep the sharks in suits at bay for so long, and by early 2001, they signed with DreamWorks Records, with an already completed record eventually titled Bleed American, ready for a mid-year release, turning down a reconciliation with Capitol Records in the process. But according to the guys, there were no hard feelings or attempts to scorn their former label, just good old-fashioned hard work.
When you went back into the studio when you got back from Europe, did you have any sort of "we'll show them" feeling, or were you just trying to show yourselves?
I thought it was pretty laid back.
Yeah, we everything was all of our goals were really self-imposed. I mean, it wasn't like.
We're gonna show them.
It felt good, we were just making the record on our own, and it just felt good that we could accomplish that on our own. It wasn't like, us setting out to prove the world wrong.
Just to prove to yourselves.
With Bleed American, the album complete, Jimmy Eat World released Bleed American, the lead single, to radio in June of 2001. A heavy Foo Fighters-esque song about the mundanities of life taking over one's true passions. The song was sequenced right at the top of the album to show the world this was an all-new Jimmy Eat World, unshackled and musically transformed. The heavy no-nonsense track was certainly a departure from anything found on Clarity and got a fair amount of airplay and some decent buzz, but was almost immediately stifled by the September 11th terror attacks later in that year. Of course, the title track and album name really had nothing to do with bleeding, little to do with Americana, and contained no thematic references to any sort of violent act. But the unfortunate choice of naming convention pushed the band to swiftly rename the record to simply Jimmy Eat World, and the lead single to Salt, Sweat, Sugar in reference to the song's catchy refrain. It was pretty obvious pretty quickly, though, that the band needed to do a soft reset with their reintroduction to the mainstream rock audience, and luckily, Jimmy Eat World, they had just the single to do so, The Middle. Written as a sort of self-help therapy anthem after being dropped by Capitol in '99, you can hear the lyrical pick-me-up themes present in the very first verse. Hey, don't write yourself off yet. It's only in your head you feel left out or looked down on. Just try your best, try everything you can, and don't worry what they tell themselves when you're away is a pretty good mantra for a group on the brink of literally being written off to the where are they now pile of music history. But equally as much, there was something universal about the way that the simple opening riff introduced us to the unassuming Jim Adkins' voice, saying, hey, as if he was a BFF checking in on all of us just to see if we were okay. From there, the band does probably one of the best emotional balancing acts in musical history by tapping into its emo roots to express that sure, things might feel bad, hell, they might even be bad, but we're all just in the middle of a ride and everything will be alright. It's an impressive feat if you really think about it, as the short sub-3 minute song doesn't overstay its welcome with overly saccharine metaphors or even let the mood drop with an out-there bridge or drop in tempo. It's just 3 verses, 3 chorus refrains, and a sweet little guitar solo for good measure to let off some steam. Released at the tail end of 2001, writer Jason Heller would aptly describe The Middle as the best song for a bad time when reflecting on it in 2012, noting that post-9/11 America was in need of something safe, something reassuring, like a pep talk from an older brother. After topping the modern rock tracks by early 2002, Jimmy Eat World truly went mainstream by crossing over to top 40 radio in the States, eventually peaking at number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100, easily becoming the band's most commercially successful song of all time. While there were some scoffs from the more cynical emo scenesters upon hearing The Middle, everywhere, those cries of sell out were roundly muted by the fact the song really did come from a place of authenticity when you consider their journey thus far, and that the entire album, inclusive of the big hit, was just so well crafted. Moments of tenderness found in Your House, Hear You Me, and My Sundown, catchy pop anthems like Sweetness, and retro jukebox jams like A Praise Chorus and the Authority song created an almost irresistible vibe around the record that solidified Jimmy Eat World as a band worth caring about. Of course, it wasn't just America that wanted the arm around the shoulder that Jim and company were providing. The Middle became the most played radio song in Canada in the year 2002, getting more spins than the likes of Avril Lavigne's Complicated, Sheryl Crow's Soak Up the Sun, and Vanessa Carlton's 1,000 Miles. On an unrelated note, was 2002 the best year for music ever? The music video for The Middle was also a wholesome piece of time capsule goodness, as we are taken to what appears to be a near-nude party through the eyes of the only guy invited that is too shy to take part in it. Our silent protagonist stumbles through the rooms of the party to see people of all shapes and sizes, although mostly conventionally attractive, taking advantage of the environment while Jimmy Eat World rocks out in the main room, naturally. The guys broke down how they got so many good-looking people to show up to one music video shoot with Much's Amanda Walsh.
I want to know, what was the audition process for that video?
The audition process for The Middle?
It was just a lot of our friends from Arizona.
Yeah, there was some like model, aspiring actor people, but the majority of them were just friends of ours.
So were you on the casting committee, like picking which friends you thought would look better in their underwear?
No.
No. I mean, there was
both of our brothers were there.
Yeah, that's true. We both had family in the video. It was mostly just like fans, friends, some like hands down just hot people, but it was mostly
Who we wish we knew.
Yeah, we got some people that we wish were friends, but I mean,
was that the point of making a video like that, to get to know some people in the underwear?
Did you get any numbers?
I didn't get any numbers. No.
I didn't.
Anyway, as for the pool party, did I mention it was also a pool party? It doesn't matter. As the pool party devolves into more claustrophobic mayhem, our shy guy finally gives into peer pressure and retreats to a closet to disrobe when he is met by a similarly uneasy girl doing the exact same thing. As the band plays out their last Everything Will Be Alright, we see our two mainstays back in their clothing, arm in arm, as they leave the party together. And kids, those two actors, they're now happily married. Okay, that's not actually true. I don't know what happened to them. After releasing power pop anthem Sweetness as the final official single off of Bleed American in mid-2002 and going platinum shortly after, Jimmy Eat World would return in 2004 with their own particular brand of ambitious yet accessible pop punk in the album Futures. While quite possibly just as adored by hardcore fans of the Jimmy Eat World catalogue as Clarity and Bleed American, and despite being mostly well received by critics, Futures only cracked gold status in North America, with lead single Pain barely cracking the Hot 100. For the band, though, it was no big deal. After seeing such highs and lows in their early career, their goal was never really to top the cultural moment that was their signature song. Reflecting on the Middle's success with Much's Lauren Toyota, they explained,
It's a perfect storm. I mean, it's not something that I think you can take from and analyze and apply. It's just a thing. I mean, there's always things you can do to make yourself less accessible. But as far as like the magic formula for commercial success, I think that's something it's not healthy to be chasing that. And I don't know, we're just all about health.
Of course, the impact of the middle on millennials of a certain age isn't limited to mere mortals like you and I. In 2016, the song was used in an Apple Music campaign starring none other than Taylor Swift. The commercial cast T Swift getting ready for a night out with our camera view acting as her mirror. While scrolling through her music library, she eventually lands on the Jimmy Eat World classic.
Okay, activities. Getting ready to go out. Oh my god, I love this song. Used to listen to this in middle school.
The simple Taylor Swift co-sign did wonders for the band, with Billboard reporting between the week before the ad's April 18th debut and the week after, The Middle soared 298% in sales and 49% in US streams, and led to a surprise appearance on Billboard's Hot Rock Songs at number 16. And it seems as though Taylor wasn't just doing the middle-loving ad for the cash either. She's been a Jimmy Eat World fan for some time. Long before the Eras Tour normalized special guest stars coming out for duets with Taylor, Jim Adkins himself jumped on stage to duet The Middle in his home state of Arizona back in 2011. The admiration between Taylor and Jim has been quite the two-way street over the years, with Jimmy Eat World releasing an emo-fied version of Taylor's We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together in 2013. Speaking to music host Matt Schichter in 2019, Adkins may have even predicted Taylor taking her superstardom to all new heights.
No, seriously, man, like she's like on top of her game. Totally. You won't, well, you never really know, but you will not see her mess up, man. She's the real deal. She's not gonna like end up like a crazy kid that like pick one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's plenty of examples.
She's got her stuff together.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it was fun, man. She was really cool, and her band is awesome. And
considering this interview took place mere months before Scooter Braun scooped up the rights to Taylor's initial master recordings of her back catalogue, which would in turn set the wheels in motion for the ambitious Taylor's versions, the Folklore Evermore career rebirth, and the record-setting Eras Tour that would push Swift to billionaire status on the back of her music career alone, it appears that at the very least, Taylor followed the sage advice given to us all by the clairvoyant Jim Adkins back in October 2001. You know you're doing better on your own, so don't buy in. Live right now, just be yourself. It doesn't matter if it's good enough for someone else, it just takes some time. I'm Miles Galloway, and that was the story of Jimmy Eat World's The Middle on Encore, with new episodes every Thursday.
Encore is an iHeartRadio Canada podcast. Subscribe to this podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. Download the iHeartRadio app for more great podcasts just like these.